Before we get to today's presentation, I have to take a moment for some shameless self-promotion. A while ago, we did a personal appearance at a gun show. They invited us to come back. So on Saturday and Sunday, March 14th and 15th of 2020, some of the crew and I will be doing a personal appearance at the Rick Riall Gun Show. That's held at the Polk County Fairgrounds in Rick Riall, Oregon. We'll have a couple of tables, we'll have some guns on display, we'll have t-shirts for sale in 2 different shades of green. We'll have the laptop computer going, showing some footage that's not really polished enough for this format. And we won't charge you money to talk about really dangerous stuff. We'll talk about dangerous stuff for free. Things like texting while driving. Or not just singing in the shower, but trying to play your electric guitar in the shower. And speaking of music, some couples have what they'll call their song. Yeah, when your girlfriend thinks that your song is something written by Air Supply and you think the song that best describes your relationship is Ugly Kid Joe's I Hate Everything About You, that's a dangerous situation. Oh, and that reminds me, ladies, a couple of the crew are single. But anyway, come out to the gun show, say hi, it'll be fun. Okay, let's get to today's presentation. Hi, we're not on the range today, we're at one of our training facilities, so you may have to put up with all kinds of extraneous noise in the background. Recently, someone made a YouTube video outlining an ammunition test he wanted to see me do, so here we are. And the ammunition he wanted to see tested was Fort Scott Munitions caliber 9x19 TUI ammunition, that stands for Tumble Upon Impact. It's an 80 grain all copper spear point projectile. Let's take a close-up look at it. On your left is a 9x19 with a 115 grain full metal jacket round nose, and on your left is our Fort Scott Munitions 9x19 with its 80 grain copper spear point TUI projectile. So what kind of velocities will we get with this ammunition? Let's do some tedious chronograph testing and see what we can find out. I've got the chronograph set up at 7 yards, and I'll shoot my Fort Scott Munitions through my Beretta 92 FS caliber 9x19, which has a 4 3/4 inch barrel. 1425, 1431, 1419, 1419, 1412, 1418, 1379, 1405. Now let's see what velocity we get out of our TUI ammunition when we fire it through the SIG 365 with a 3-inch barrel. 1304. 1304. 1282. 1266. 1276. 1269. And 1262. Now let's go crunch the numbers. Well, I crunched the numbers, and it comes with the normal caveats that chronographs don't always agree with each other, and certain environmental factors like elevation and ambient temperature can affect chronograph results. Also, you saw we had some duplicate readings. We got 1419 twice in a row with the Beretta and 1304 twice in a row with the SIG. When that happens, it's indicative that the second one was a malfunction, so we throw out that second one. And with that, I did the math and came out with a mean velocity with the Beretta of 1,412 and with the SIG 1,276. So the Beretta and its barrel, which is 1 3/4 inch longer, we got 136 feet per second more, and that's a lot more. But with both of these, it seems like we're getting really high velocity. Remember, these are 80 grain projectiles. If I were to chronograph your typical 9x19 115 full metal jacket round nose ammunition with a Beretta, I would expect to get a velocity of 1100 to 1150 feet per second. But that still leaves us with, we're getting high velocities. And how will these velocities translate into effectiveness on the target? Let's put that to the test. The way we're going to test our effectiveness is with the meat target. Now, for those who haven't seen it before, the meat target is leather jacket skin followed by pork steak pectoral, pork ribs, a bag of oranges to simulate lung tissue, more pork ribs on the back, 4 layers, t-shirt on the front, 4 layers on the back, and the whole thing followed by the new and improved high-tech fleece bullet stop. And we'll shoot our TUI ammunition from 7 yards, and we'll start with our SIG 365 with a 3-inch barrel. Well, here's our pork steak pectoral, and it just has 9mm holes in it. The ribs on the front of the target just have 9mm holes in them. Where projectiles hit the ribs broke them. Our grapefruit lung tissue, that's interesting. Some of them just have 9mm holes in them. Some of them are really chewed up, indicative that the projectiles were tumbling. Now, the ribs on the back of the target, this is very interesting. There really is just holes in there. It doesn't look like it did a lot of damage. However, if you take a close look at these holes, you can see some of them are elongated, showing that the projectiles were tumbling. But the real bottom line is, they just put holes through the ribs. There are 2 things about these projectiles that made quite an impression, however. First, every one of them penetrated somewhere between the 20th and 30th layer of fleece. That's a lot of penetration. Some people might say that's a lot of over-penetration. The second thing is the condition these projectiles are in now. Let's take a close-up look at them. And here's our projectiles with virtually no deformation. So our Fort Scott Munitions ammunition gave us a lot of over-penetration, but its damage to the meat target was questionable. So now I've got a new meat target set up, and I'll shoot this from 7 yards with the SIG 365, but now I'm loaded with Remington green and white box 9x19 115 grain full metal jacket round nose. Let's see how our results with this compared to the results with the Fort Scott Munitions ammunition. Well, we shot our bungee cord in half, so we'll take a moment, do some repair, install a new bungee cord, and then fire a couple more shots. Now the question comes up, what makes this the new and improved high-tech fleece bullet stop? And the answer is the bungee cord that attaches it to the target. I've got our meat target taken apart, but the first thing I want to do is show you a close-up of what these full metal jacket projectiles look like. And like the TUI projectiles, the FMJ projectiles have basically 0 deformation. So we see that our full metal jacket projectiles and our TUI projectiles, in terms of their deformation, or rather lack thereof, have very similar results. What was also very similar is the performance on our pork chop pectoral. It just has 9mm holes in it. The ribs on the front of the target, again, just 9mm holes in them. The grapefruit lung tissue, some just have 9mm holes in them. Some of the grapefruit are chewed up pretty well. And our ribs on the back of the target, we see that they just have 9mm holes in them, but some of those are elongated, suggesting that the full metal jacket projectiles were tumbling. So we see very similar performance. What was dissimilar was the amount of penetration into the fleece bullet stop. As where with the TUI projectiles, they all went through to between the 20th and 30th layer. With the full metal jacket projectiles, one was stopped by the first layer of fleece, one made it through to about the 10th, and 2 of them made it well past the 20th layer, so some really inconsistent penetration. But what I'm really seeing from this rudimentary demonstration is that the performance of our typical FMJ ammunition and our high-tech TUI ammunition seems to be very similar. But while we're on the subject of penetration, let's try a different penetration test. Now we've got a new meat target set up, but this meat target is wearing 2A body armor. We've demonstrated on several previous occasions that when 9x19 115 grain full metal jacket round nose ammunition is fired from a handgun, it will not penetrate 2A body armor. However, let's shoot this from 7 yards with our SIG 365, which is loaded with our Fort Scott Munitions ammunition, which is, remember, an 80 grain all copper spear point projectile, and see how it stacks up against 2A body armor. I fired 3 shots, and all 3 not only went through the body armor, they achieved 100% penetration on our meat target, and 1 was stopped by the first layer of fleece, 1 was stopped by about the 20th layer, and 1 of those projectiles made it through past the 30th layer of fleece. Let's take a close-up look at these projectiles. And we see that the only deformation is that the tips are blunted just a little bit. Now this meat target is wearing 2A body armor and a layer of 3A body armor. When you combine 3A and 2A body armor, that does not necessarily mean that it synergizes to become 5A body armor, but still, this is a lot more than just the 2A. So we'll shoot this from 7 yards with the Beretta 92FS. Remember, with its longer barrel, it gave us a mean velocity of 136 feet per second more. So let's see how our TUI ammunition does against this target. Well, I fired 3 shots, and all 3 went through both layers of body armor. None achieved 100% penetration through the meat target, but despite our best efforts of digging through our grapefruit lung tissue, we were only able to find 1 projectile. Let's take a close-up look at it. And we see that our projectile is now blunted quite a bit when compared to an unfired projectile. So what about accuracy? We know that when you use an ammunition with a projectile weight or a velocity that's significantly outside the parameters of what would be considered typical for a caliber, that accuracy can suffer both in group size and group location. So I'll go back 15 yards with my Beretta 92FS, and I'll shoot the target on your left with the Remington green and white box 115 grain full metal jacket ammunition, and the target on your right with the Fort Scott Munitions 80 grain tumble upon impact ammunition, and let's see how the groups compare. So with the Remington ammunition, I've got a fairly good group. The one that's high is just me, and yes, that's annoying. But we see that the group is much better than what we got with the TUI ammunition, and this is a very common result when I shoot the lighter, faster projectiles out of my Beretta 92FS. However, these results will depend entirely on your individual firearm. Just because I get these results with my pistol does not mean that you'll get them with your pistol, even if yours is a 92FS. But the real bottom line here is it shows us that whatever ammo you're going to use, you have to test it. So the takeaways from all of this. Well, we saw with a lighter bullet at higher velocities, you might run into some accuracy problems. That's very common in hyper ammunitions. However, that lighter projectile was giving me significantly less felt recoil, and that might be a big plus for some people. Now, in terms of damage to the meat target, it appeared that our TUI ammunition wasn't doing a lot more damage than conventional FMJ ammunition. But when we bring the body armor into the equation, then we see that if you're going up against an adversary who has the TUI ammunition, not only does 2A plus 3A not equal 5A, it might equal just 1. So as always, don't try this at home on what you call a professional, and thanks for watching the Fort Scott Munitions Tumble Upon Impact Ammunition video.